The Hogsty is brought to you by TicketClub.com, your one-stop shop for live events nationwide. Whether you're looking for game, theater, or live performance tickets, don't sweat it. TicketClub.com has you covered. So make sure you're going there for all your live entertainment needs, and make sure you're clicking over to them from the banner at the top of thehogsty.com.
It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and John Worrell. And now, here's your host, Chris Leary. And welcome back to another episode of It's Just Business. This is the show where we talk about all things related to sports and business and media and law and all sorts of other things. It's the catch-all show of the Hogsty Network. I'm, of course, not Chris Leary. Chris has abandoned us in favor of a wedding this weekend. I'm joined by our all-knowing super sub, Alex. Alex, how are you?
I'm good. This is weird when it's just you and I doing a show that's not the Hogsty, since John's also out. But
and we're going to go right into Hogsty after this. So we're going to be talking for 2 hours.
As we record them out of sequence from what people actually hear. Yes.
Yeah, true. Yeah, and John had a personal thing going on. He couldn't make it either, kind of a last-minute thing. But he will return at the next show. So in the meantime, how are you, Alex? Anything new and interesting going on?
I am good. I'm going to save the new and interesting stuff more for the other show. But
you can repeat it, and you can say the same thing
or
again in an hour.
If we hadn't really kind of broken kayfabe about the order, we could just totally make up, oh, man, can you believe what Jamal said on the Hogsty earlier?
Man, it was just what a terrible take that was.
Yeah, and Sean just dropping so much profanity.
Sean's going to be fired. That's just all there is to it.
Yeah, that was rough. No, I'm good. Things have been, pretty busy around here lately. My house seems to constantly be falling apart now that spring's here, which is annoying. But
well, so your house was flooding the last time we talked about this a couple weeks ago.
Then the fridge broke, and now I've got a leaky pipe, and it's all water damage. I don't know what's going on with my pipes.
Well, in the past year, I have 2 refrigerators in this house. And
right.
In the past year, one of them completely died. The washing machine died, and now the dryer is dead.
Didn't you talk to us about the whole refrigerator dying thing, I think, at one point?
Yeah, it was a nightmare. But yeah, I had to get See, I have one that's like the backup fridge. It's like a normal,
the
older
classic
fridge.
in the garage fridge.
Yeah, that one has never had a problem, and it's like 13 years old.
Right.
And the one that this is the third fridge I'm on now, is like a fancy fridge, and that's the one that keeps dying.
Yeah, I hate having fancy fridges. The one that had a problem for us, it was the water filter on the fridge needed to be replaced, so I went to replace it. I couldn't figure it out. I had to call the plumber who couldn't figure it out. It was a whole thing. When I
say died, I mean it no longer works. It's now a coffin.
Well, it's one of those probably like an LG. It's got a touchscreen nonsense things.
Well, I don't go that fancy on it. I refuse to go that high end on it. Yeah. So now my dryer's dead.
Why are refrigerators $3,000 and have touchscreens? It doesn't need this.
You have refrigerators that have internet capability that can automatically talk to the manufacturer.
Yeah.
I don't want my refrigerator talking to anybody.
It's also taking video of you and sending it to the manufacturer the whole time. So anytime you walk around your, kitchen naked or whatever you're doing, it's sending that to the guy
and
in
you've got
Hong
people,
Kong.
yeah, exactly, and you have people, who are doing God knows what to that.
Yeah.
Now, so you're gonna find yourself on a Bob Kraft porno site.
Exactly. Oh yeah, hey, we forgot to put that in the list of topics for today.
Well, Bob. It's kind of an ongoing thing. For those of you who don't know, Bob Kraft is fighting his prostitution case, and the latest on it in short form is that his attorneys are trying to suppress the release of the video to the public. That Florida has very, very liberal, or liberal's the wrong term, has very
aggressive, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, laws towards the release of evidence. And so the prosecutors, as a tactic, as a tactic to put pressure on Kraft, said, you know what, we have no choice but to release this, so here you go. And so he filed an emergency motion with the court to suppress it. And so the status of it is that there is a hearing on 29th of April to determine whether or not that video gets released. My guess, without knowing the Florida case law, is that it's going to get released with some, his
blurry.
parts pixelated. Yeah,
Yeah.
so a tiny little microscopically small part of the video is going to be
I don't know if you're saying
released.
something about Bob Kraft there.
Oh, I am.
Okay.
I am.
All right.
Yeah.
The best part about this whole thing is the stupid on Twitter, don't release the video reaction that a lot of people have. And then you have the occasional person, and I'll admit, I'm kind of one of these people. I just say release it just to be a contrarian. And I don't actually want to watch it, but
No, I mean, God, of course not. But I mean, I think Kraft's argument, ultimately, from a legal perspective, is a loser. Ultimately, there was a court order. It's not like the cops did this without a warrant. They have a court order that allowed the video. And by the way, they did catch criminal activity on the video. And at least in Texas, because it's a very long story that I'll tell you off air, but I had to research this at one point in time. I read every porno, sleazy adult, adult massage place
cut that
case.
out of the audio.
I read every case in Texas about that at one point in time several years ago. I mean, and there's, this kind of thing is not abnormal. Kraft needs to settle it and be done with it.
Yeah,
He's
and
stupid for doing this.
they offered him an out, and he didn't take it. And
They offered him a pretrial diversion program, basically. When
Right.
they're saying if you agree that you would have had to plead guilty, that's basically. What it basically boils down to is a pretrial diversion program,
I consider
and
that
he should
an
have
out,
taken
though.
it.
That's a hey.
No, that's the yeah. I mean, that's not abnormal for these type of cases. For somebody who's a prominent citizen who doesn't have any kind of criminal record, and it's not that abnormal for the cops to do so, or the prosecutors rather to do that. He should have taken it. He's stupid for going through all this. He's going to cause himself more problems. Yeah.
It's all just a PR thing, and why wouldn't you just end it?
Because he's got an enormous ego.
I
That's
guess
why.
so. And I never trust a man who wears a different color collar with his shirt like he always does.
See, I never noticed that. Of course, I wear T-shirts every day. I don't have to wear work clothes. So
You don't have to put on a collar shirt for work these days? That's lucky for you.
well, I do. No, I do. I mean, I'm
okay.
saying when I'm not in work clothes.
Yeah.
And I had a friend a while ago who, well, I don't want to say, but he's stylish, and I said, "What's my style?" He said, "You don't have a style. You have no style
There you
whatsoever."
There you go. I'm with you. I go to wherever I can find cheap shirts when I need to replace them. That's what my style is. What's cheap?
Yeah. That's all I care about too. I have no eye for it.
Anyway, let's get back.
Okay,
focused.
so that was
not talk
Bob
about
Kraft.
Kraft shirts.
Yeah, that was the Bob Kraft case. What we really wanted to start with is this: Russell Wilson just signed an absolutely ginormous contract. He put a metaphorical gun to the head of the Seattle Seahawks and basically threatened that if he doesn't get he openly and publicly threatened that if he did not get the largest contract in NFL history, then he would not negotiate this at all this year. 2019 was the last year of his contract, so he was saying if you don't do it right now to an arbitrary deadline, which was, I believe, last Wednesday, I think it was, last week sometime.
I think that it was before they had OTAs or something like that.
There was no real basis for it whatsoever, at all. But he said basically, if you don't do this, then we're not going to negotiate at all, and which is tantamount to saying you're going to have to franchise tag me at the end of the year. That's basically what he's saying.
It wasn't quite a holdout, but it was a holdout. Yeah.
Yeah. So the contract was 4 years, $140 million, $65 million signing bonus, $107 million guaranteed, average annual salary of $35 million. Now here's where I'm going with this. So I'm going to read the cap hits. 2019 is $26 million, $26.2 million. 2020, $31 million. 2021, $32 million. Then it jumps up to $37 and then $39 million in 2022 and 2023. And his dead money drastically exceeds his cap hit through 2022, and even then his dead cap in 2022 is $26 million, which is a ginormous number they probably wouldn't want to do anyway. And then it's not till 2023 that he's finally got a number where they could probably cut him. So here's my question, and we don't need to debate from a football perspective. We'll say that for the Hogstye, but
Sure.
What I'm wondering here is certainly contracts like this are harbingers of things to come. I'm wondering if we've gotten to the point where quarterback contracts are so large that they are really going to limit the ability of teams to build solid, complete championship teams around them?
I mean, I think we've kind of seen in the past that is the case. You know, we always talk about the Joe Flacco example, but there is kind of Joe Flacco wasn't a elite quarterback factor. I would say Russell Wilson, you know, a much better quarterback overall than a Flacco or some of the other guys who get these monster deals like Kirk did when he went to Minnesota. But at the same time, yeah, you're going to limit something when you do that, and you know, it's on the team partly to either say no but no one's going to say no. I mean,
well, should they though?
No,
See, this is where I'm going with this.
But if you say no to a franchise quarterback, you're potentially blowing up your entire roster, right? That's the fear. It's, we could draft somebody. You know, okay, let's say Seattle says no. They get rid of Russell Wilson. They draft. They're pretty late in the draft, so they're getting Daniel Jones.
Right.
Are you building a franchise around Daniel Jones? Probably not.
No, but from a value perspective, is the team ultimately better off with Daniel Jones or somebody like Daniel Jones on a rookie contract rather than Russell Wilson taking up a cap percentage, which is going to be, you know, like 26? I mean, that's, you know, 15% or roughly off the top of my head all by itself. And so is the team better off, like the Rams? Mm-hmm. You know, the Rams have we've talked about this on the Hawks side. The reason why the Rams can sign a bunch of players is they have Jared Goff on a small deal. Right. And so you're locking yourself in with Russell Wilson through at a minimum 2021 and realistically through 2022. I'm just wondering if we've gotten to the point where the teams are better off to say no to this kind of thing and then just draft a quarterback.
Well, I mean, I believe me, I agree with you in theory, and
I don't know if I agree with me. I'm sort of working through it live on the air.
In theory, yeah, teams should and could do it. Like, if you really wanted to be I'm going to build the other 52 spots guy, and let's say you just start getting Pro Bowl talent after Pro Bowl talent all over the rest of your roster, and then you just say, okay, we're going to draft quarterbacks every 3 years, and we're just going to kind of cycle through them. And, you know, you don't sign anybody to a big deal. I guess you could do that, but no one's ever tried it. That's the thing. Somebody has to be the first team to even try it for other teams to mirror it. And yeah. I don't know if anyone will take that hit.
Probably not. I'm wondering, what I've always wondered here is maybe it's time for the NFL to consider implementing the type of system that the NBA has. And for those of you out there, I know, Alex, you know this, but
Bird or what?
Yeah, I know you know this, but for the benefit of the public out there,
okay.
The NBA has what's called a soft cap. The NFL has what's called a hard cap, you know, in business terms. Mm-hmm. And the NFL means this is the number, period, dot, the end. You can't go over it no matter what. You know, it's about $187 million this year. The NBA has a cap too. I don't remember what the number is right off the top of my head, but
I think it's 100 and 200 or something are the two numbers.
Yeah.
Roughly.
Yeah, well, okay. It's something like that. Again, I can't remember. It doesn't matter for these purposes. So the NBA has a number, but what they also have are a bunch of exceptions. They have what's called a bird rights. You know, they have the ability to sign a couple, you know, their players to contracts that would put them over the cap. So what I'm wondering is if the NFL would be better off, and I have an answer in my head, but I'm going to present the argument. Is the NFL better off building some exceptions into the cap wherein they can designate one player or two players or some number of players to have contracts that are larger, you know, that they can exempt some portion or all of that contract from the salary cap, and that would allow teams to keep players like Russell Wilson and not just destroy their team?
I mean, I in theory love the idea, but I mean, I know you and I've argued for years about what the NFL should do in terms of their salary cap and how it's good for the owners to have a hard cap versus a soft cap. And I mean, but at some point you have to say, yeah, these contracts for quarterbacks just get insane to the point where I feel like you have to have some kind of who was it, Josh Norman or somebody? It was some cornerback who said that the NFL should make quarterback salaries completely exempt from the rest of the cap.
I don't remember Josh Norman saying that, but I'm not saying you're wrong.
Some big name cornerback I remember hearing saying that years ago.
Well, this is kind of what I'm getting at, and my answer to that is that the owners don't want that. I think people have to understand, since this show is all about the money, it's called It's Just Business. People need to understand. It sounds wonderful, and from a competitive standpoint, it would be wonderful. Because the Redskins might have kept Kirk Cousins under those circumstances.
Sure.
Not that it might, at a minimum, he would have been better than Josh Johnson and Mark Sanchez. You know. But the owners ultimately don't want that. And what I've always said on this show is that the purpose of the salary cap is to give the owners an excuse to not pay money.
Right.
The owners can afford this. The NFL makes,
Lots of money. Let's just say
17 billion a year, something like that. They can. It's one of the most solid, financially stable businesses in the world. I mean, it's not, British Petroleum, but it's not that far removed from it. Either.
I mean, I see. I don't really know offhand. It's not gonna what does the NFL pull in revenue wise roughly? Do you know?
I want to say it's like 17, 18 million. I think something like a billion. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, not
in that
Apple,
neighborhood at least.
But it's up there.
Yeah, and it's got a bulletproof, income stream also, thanks to these long-term TV contracts. So, it would be great, but I think my answer to this is that the NFL owners don't want that, and they don't want a built-in written excuse to have to do it. Because ultimately, NFL owners care more about income than they do the competitive portion of the game. Sorry to burst your bubble out there, people, but that's just the truth.
And I understand that side of it. I don't know what you do when you're going to have quarterbacks in probably 5 years. Quarterbacks trying to get $50 million a year, 10 years. Well,
it's coming soon because Russell Wilson's already got a $39 million cap in 2023, and just projecting forward, Jared Goff's going to get a contract in 2 years?
Yeah, Wentz I think it's next year, right?
Yeah,
or is he the year after?
Wentz, I think Wentz is the year after, and there's going to be others. Pick your, Patrick Mahomes in 2 years, if not sooner. There's going to be others, and Russell Wilson will not be the highest paid player in NFL history for very long.
No.
And so we are going to get to the point soon where somebody's going to have a $50 million cap hit.
Right. I mean, we're seeing it in other sports too, where like baseball, we saw it this year with Mike Trout, where he got that record-breaking deal, and sports are about to have a big jump, I think, in terms of player salaries that I don't know if owners are really ready for conceiving what these guys are going to start demanding, the top talents in every league.
Well, you see, the MLB has instituted upon itself. They don't have a salary cap. Yeah, but the luxury tax is operating in effect as a salary cap. And again, this is an excuse for the MLB owners to not spend money. Mm-hmm. I don't blame. I mean, it's their business. They can do what they want. Yeah. I think the only other answer to this is that the owners might have to just collectively, some may call it collusion, stand up and say no.
Right.
We are not going to do this anymore. If you want to leave and go somewhere else, but we're not doing this.
And
we aren't doing it.
It is kind of a tricky situation because, I mean, I get it. They're the owners, but no one goes to a stadium to watch Dan Snyder. No one no one goes to the stadium to watch Mark Sanchez either.
Right. Well, they go to the stadium
they
go to the stadium to watch Russell Wilson, not Russell Wilson's backup. There are people who go to see Seattle Seahawks games explicitly and only to see Russell Wilson play,
right? Because they love Russell Wilson.
He's a franchise quarterback in, like I would go, like I have a friend of mine who just yesterday said, "Why don't you come up, to Seattle and we'll go see an Iron Maiden concert."
Seattle, right?
Yeah, he said, "Let's go see Iron Maiden and you can come stay for the game." And
that does sound like a very you kind of week.
Oh yeah, Iron Maiden in football. Yeah, you can't can't beat that. But I would do that just because I'd like to see Russell Wilson play live.
And their defense is amazing, and that stadium I hear is amazing. Like Seattle's.
I've been in the stadium.
Yeah, I've heard it's a great stadium.
Yeah,
but
my point here is that either this keeps spiraling out of control.
Right.
Or the owners do something. It seems to me the only two things to do are, number one, you just stand up and say, no, we're not doing it. And if you want to leave, but we're not giving you this contract. And then draft somebody, and at least on a value basis, it might be better off.
I think,
the fans would be mad.
There's definitely that argument, and that's fine. I just, there's only so much money, right? like, in the end, there's only so much money that you have. And it seems like some of these agents just don't care what that number is going to be anymore.
Well, they just don't have to care.
And they don't. No, they don't have to.
It's their job to advocate to get as much money for their clients as possible.
Right.
And here's the truth. Also, the other truth is that people out there may not know is that the owners fight tooth and nail to get as much excluded from the definition of gross revenue as possible. Because how the salary cap works is there's a definition of gross revenue in the CBA, and then the salary cap is based on a percentage of gross revenue.
And it lists
so the NFL
TV
owners,
contracts, the merchandise, things like that. Yeah.
A whole bunch of things, and it gets really complicated. I don't have it in front of me. I don't want to bore everybody with the details of it. But the bottom line is the owners fight tooth and nail to get as much excluded from that as possible, so they don't have to pay the players. So there's a lot more money out there that they could include if they want. But again, the salary cap is just a way to get the owners an excuse to not pay money.
Right.
They don't have to have a salary cap at all.
No.
They could get rid of it.
I don't remember when the NFL didn't have a salary cap. It was great.
The Players Association would be all in favor of it.
Right. Well, they would and they wouldn't, because at that time when it didn't, players also got paid almost nothing, comparatively speaking.
Well, no, you could, theoretically, if you really want to be player friendly, you could have a minimum.
Right.
And then have no ceiling.
Yeah, that's true. You could do that. And they did come up with that weird minimum thing that they do now where you have to pay X percentage every couple of years. And I've never understood quite how that math works, because it seems like it
seems like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were below it for years and nobody noticed and cared.
Right. They were paying like $40 million a year on salary, and I was like, huh? What?
Yeah, to be perfectly honest, I have not delved into the math of that. So, I
tried
tell you
to,
the math.
and my eyes go
It's not
cross-eyed.
easy. Yeah, it's not easy. It isn't easy.
Yeah, but
okay. So I think we've probably said enough on this, but the Wilson contract is just a harbinger of things to come. It's going to get larger. The NFL, I think, teams are going to have to do something, or you're going to risk ruining your team for the sake of one player. And the answer, definitely from an owner's perspective, is not to just raise the salary cap, because they don't want that. And so it seems to me that at some point, teams are just going to have to say, no, we're not going to be held hostage by these demands.
To me, if you're paying a player that much money, you got to realize the pool. I think I did the math last time around before they re-upped or raised the cap this year, and I think the average per player is something like $3 million. If you take the whole salary cap, average it across a roster.
Oh, okay.
So if you're going to pay one guy 30, he's worth 10 guys. You got to think of it that way too.
Yeah, it's not quite that simple, but in concepts, right. Your theory is right. And how many
Wilson ain't worth a starting offense.
Yeah, it isn't worth 13 players all by itself.
Right.
Okay, well then let's move on from this into another football related topic, and this is all about insurance. So. This is not a news story, but we have not covered this on this show yet, amazingly enough, and that's my fault for just not thinking of it before this morning, and that's this. With the CTE lawsuits and the rise of head injuries and the link between head injuries and bad things like suicide and depression and other things, football has become harder and harder to insure. And we're reaching the point at which, the NFL is large enough that this probably won't ever be a problem. I'm actually reading a story from ABC News from the 17th of January. Yes, I'm late, 3 months late. Sue me. In the title is "For the NFL and All of Football: A New Threat in an Evaporating Insurance Market." And this is by Steve Faineru. Forgive me if these are the two guys who broke the Barry Bonds story. Steve Faineru and Mark Faineru Wada. Yeah, those two guys are those are the Barry Bonds guys. There's a book about it. It's on my shelf. But their point here is that because of the rise of the CTE issues, that football is becoming harder and harder to insure. And it's to the point where Pop Warner leagues are wondering whether Pop Warner is going to continue to exist. Mm-hmm. And the NFL insurer, and they've been working with one company, Berkeley, forever, and their rates keep rising and rising and rising and rising. And so, the question that these two authors are posing is can football exist and continue to exist on a long-term basis in the face of the ever-rising insurance insurance coverages?
And, we know this is a violent sport, and so it's not a surprise to me that the insurance rates for American-style football, to not get too particular, it's not shocking those rates are high. I don't know. And that article, none of them. I've read a couple things about this. I've never seen anything about is it different for like the CFL because Canada has universal health care, so I don't know if the insurance system would be a little different. But that notwithstanding, I've heard about this for a while because I think there's only one company now that does it, not I think it is Barkley or
it's Berkeley.
Berkeley, sorry. And there was, at one point, a couple others, and everyone's dropped out now except for them. So they're the sole guys for the NFL. They were the only guys who were willing to insure the AAF when the AAF was around. They'll probably be the only people doing the XFL when the XFL's around. So,
yeah, and there were a bunch of other companies. This article mentions a couple others. Hartford, Travelers, Fireman's Funds. Those are major, if you know anything about insurance at least, those are major names in the insurance game. And really, again, it's not so much the survival of the NFL necessarily.
It's the survival of Pop Warner that's the real story.
Yeah, and local,
high schools.
Local high schools, in maybe not, the University of Alabama.
No.
But certain universities don't want to take the risk.
It's one of the top reasons that if you hear about like a local high school shutting down their football programs, usually that's one of, if not the reason, is the insurance cost.
Well, yeah, and that's what this article is really getting at. If the insurance costs continue to spiral out of control, what happens to the game?
Right.
Can they still play the game? Look, companies have insurance. Even big companies, because the NFL ultimately doesn't really need insurance from a financial perspective, right? I mean, if they didn't want to pay for insurance, they could survive without it.
Do everything out of pocket if they had to.
Yeah. But it's a management of risk.
Right.
And then also if there are usually, lenders will require insurance. Lenders require companies to have insurance. And so you could self-insure this. Self-insurance is a business term, and that means that a company will satisfy its lenders or its, or other requirements by a program of self-insurance, and that means they have to establish that the net worth is X and that they have a certain amount of cash reserves that they can pay these claims. The NFL could do that if they wanted to, but you don't want to because you don't want to have to do it.
No, it's understandable because the reserves are, I'm assuming, would be billions.
Yeah, right. And so you don't want to do that. So what happens if Berkeley gets eventually says the risk of this is too great, and then they're not going to insure the NFL either. What happens to the game? My sense of it is that everything is insurable if you just pay big enough premium and there's enough exclusions on the policy.
Right.
So I don't think insurance is ever going to go away.
I mean, in that article they said there were a lot of things they were getting out of the policy or cutting out of the policy. A lot of neurological things in Pop Warner were cut out. Just to keep the insurance premiums, from going insane, basically.
Those are exclusions.
Yeah.
That's what's called exclusions on the policy.
Now, I wonder, and sorry, I didn't want to cut you off.
No, it's all right.
If the price for the premiums gets too high for Pop Warner or high school football, the NFL knows it needs those pipelines, to eventually get players. And do you think the NFL eventually would try and, if they couldn't find any other option, would they try and establish some kind of insurance system so they can back those things?
Oh, no, absolutely no way. I mean, no, they're not going to spend that kind of money. I mean, I suppose if I were a forward-thinking owner, you would never want to put the NFL in that kind of position where the NFL has those claims. But maybe what you do is, I'm thinking out loud here, and I'm not saying we've ever read this, they've ever thought about it. This is just me speculating.
What would Steve do? Plan B. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe what you would do is you form a separate NFL insurance company.
Right.
That's financially
entity,
backed by the NFL owners separately or maybe it's not a subsidiary of the NFL, but it's.
Mm-hmm.
You
It's
couldn't
its
have
own
it as a
entity, I see
subsidiary.
that.
Yeah, you'd have to have it sort of owned by corporations controlled by the owners, and then basically that becomes football insurance.
I'm
more
surprised
or less.
that there's 32 owners. I'm surprised none of them are in the insurance industry. I mean, it's a huge industry financially speaking.
It is, and I don't know. Maybe somebody is. I mean,
That's
mean,
true. I
I'd
don't
have
pay
to go
enough
check.
attention to-
Yeah, I'd have to check to see who all these owners are, because who knows. But I mean, again, the NFL doesn't want to do that unless they have to, because that's just spending more money, putting more money at risk. But you could do something like that. It just wouldn't be the NFL itself would not do that, because that'd be stupid. And the NFL is very risk adverse in that regard. So it's a thought. At some point, I guess you have to, because your point is valid. It's that if you can't have, Dwayne Haskins as a quarterback, if Dwayne doesn't have a high school to play at, and he doesn't have a Pop Warner team or other select entity,
you can probably get away with getting rid of Pop Warner and going flag at that age. I know that a lot of people hate that, but
well, I mean, you do play
anyway.
They do play flag football through like about age 8 or so,
Right.
and then it goes to tackle at that. And the God's honest truth is that these kids aren't hitting very hard at that age. I mean, there's probably. I mean, I'm a little bit more open to risk than maybe some others like that, but there's not a huge risk that some kid is going to end up being a vegetable, like Junior Seau, and when he's 8.
But I think that with what happened with all the CTE stuff, there was a lot of research that kind of said you got to go a little older than that now. Like 13 is when they say they should start playing tackle, and not 8. But like you could take some of this stuff within reason and kind of figure out a system. But I think the NFL can't just sit on its hands and watch things fall down. They got to be right. Somebody in the NFL should be like thinking this through, and I'm assuming someone is.
Well, yeah, I mean, part of it also is that the CTE research isn't conclusive yet.
No,
this article mentions that there are scientists, doctors that disagree, and they mention Merrill Hodge and some doctor. I'm going to find it here in a minute. Have written a book disputing the conclusions that have been drawn so far about CTE.
Right.
And I'm gonna I can't find it in here. This is a very, very long article.
It was a long article.
Yeah, it's very, very long.
You sent it to everyone like 5 minutes before we recorded. I was like,
yeah, I know. It's like, here, read this.
Yeah. And I looked at it and I was like, okay, I know what this is talking about because I've read this before.
Yeah. But point is, not everybody agrees with this. It's not conclusive. There are people who, it's Merrill Hodge and Dr. Peter Cummings, who is a Boston University neuropathologist. So, and their book is called Brainwashed: The Bad Science Behind CTE and the Plot to Destroy Football. I mean, you do have to say that the doctor behind the original CTE, who's the subject of the Will Smith movie, the name I can't remember, he is very anti-football. And his conclusion was you just basically, you can't play football.
Right.
And is that a bit extreme? Yes, probably. And I think that's probably the book is probably, I think you'd have to be dumb to not acknowledge that, getting hit year after year, day after day for for season after season isn't bad for you.
Well, I mean, come on. I've always said there's a little bit of common sense here in that you should really avoid getting blows to the head a lot.
Right. I mean, that's just common sense.
Yeah.
So now, is there a conclusive link to the dementia that Mike Webster faced? And the fact that he played high school football?
Yeah, of course.
Right. And that doctor in the Will Smith movie would say absolutely so. Merrill Hodge and Dr. Peter Cummings are saying no. So the point is, there's not a conclusion about it yet. I don't know. I mean, the bottom line to this is I think this is a topic that is not going to go away.
No.
It's not going here anytime soon. It's going to get worse no matter what Merrill Hodge says. Everything is insurable up to a point.
Mm-hmm.
Almost every risk can be insured.
But
because it's just a big financial math problem. The insurance company's going to assign a level risk to an insured event,
right?
And then they're going to set a premium that allows them to make money,
right? And I don't know what their cut is offhand. I'm going to just put like, let's say 10% as just an easy number.
Well, it's not really. That's not really how. There's not really a percentage to it. It's that you're saying their net profit.
Yeah.
Because you have to measure the premiums.
Make sure they get their net profit. That's the big thing.
Yeah, you have to have the premiums being drawn in, and then subtract the losses that they pay out. And so, if it's really risky, then like a 16-year-old driving a car is like a 16-year-old male driving a car is very risky for the auto insurance. So their premiums are higher.
Yes, you and I were just talking about that.
Yeah. I want to get into that here.
Yeah,
but the insurance companies are going to set premiums very high, and at some point, Pop Warner is going to be able to afford it. That's the point. The high school, the high school in the middle of Iowa is not going to be able to afford premiums like that.
Right.
That's the risk.
I don't know what
not
that
they
number
can't.
is. It's going to depend on the school too. And there's going to be some schools where it's like, hey, this public school won't do it, but a private school might. And I don't know what the number is right now. I wish that article really didn't even get into any numbers, which I wish it would have. Like, what is the NFL paying? That'd be interesting to know.
Well, it's not really public. It's
Right.
not publicly available information,
Right.
so we're never going to know, the exact numbers.
What schools are paying is publicly available, probably.
Yeah, it is. So I don't know what to do about it. It's an interesting take on a problem without a great solution. So many of these problems we talk about, don't have great solutions, and this is another one.
No.
Paying NCAA players. There's one that doesn't have an easy solution.
Right.
This is another one. Speaking of the NCAA, I was going to do Tyreek Hill next. We'll come back to Tyreek Hill. Let's do the since I brought it up.
Is kind of quick. Let's do that.
Yeah. So Alex found a story about an NCAA settlement that is an interesting business topic here. So Alex, if you could explain to the public what this is all
I'll just nutshell it. In, I believe, 2010, there was some changes made to how much NCAA players can get when it comes to stipends and some of the other stuff involving their not contract with the schools, but you know what I'm talking about. Their
scholarships.
Yes, with their scholarships. I don't know why I was drawing a blank on scholarships.
That's all right.
But yeah, so they had a kind of, there was a basically class action suit with every player that was like a NCAA Division I basketball player as well as football player. And it's over 50,000 players altogether joined this class action suit to sue the NCAA saying you were underpaying us basically for this year or this couple of years, however, I can't remember if it was 1 or 2 years. 50,000 people, settlement's $200 million, and the NCAA could contend it again and like kick it up to the next branch of the legal system.
Appeal which is an appeal.
Yeah, yeah. But I don't know if they're going to yet. I didn't see that in the articles I saw.
Okay, so the nature of athletic scholarships has changed in the past several years.
Right.
And the caps on the amount of money that can come with an athletic scholarship have been raised, and that's what this story is all about. It used to be that an athletic scholarship would only cover room, board, books, tuition, and the problem therein was that these athletes aren't allowed to have a job, and so they were placed in a position where they're paying for a lot of things on the road themselves. They only have to eat at, they can only eat at the chow hall. That's a military term. The dining hall at the university.
They have to stay on campus. They have nothing else they can do.
Because they can't get a job, and so they weren't allowed to have a job, and so they had no money. And so now in a few years ago, the rules were changed wherein a lot of these other stipends and there's more money that comes with it. The idea was that it covers the complete cost of their education. That's the idea. It was also
part of the because again, this was back in 2010 that this first change happened. This was also part of the early phase of the whole players want to get paid situation.
Yeah, and it's not quite the same, but it is down that road here. And so this lawsuit is all about the idea that those people who are a part of the class were not properly paid in accordance with the change in NCAA rules about athletic scholarships.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, it is, the paying the players thing is more about the value that these players are bringing to the university is not compensated, but it still ultimately has to do with, players college players putting out a whole lot of effort and not really getting much out of it, other than their education. Which, I mean, that sounds ridiculous because education is, almost, you can't put a price on education.
No, and that's a whole different part of it. But this does work out to be a decent, and not like life-changing money, but it's $4,000 a person roughly. If this ends up being $200 million split up amongst that many people.
By the way, I'd like to here's my rant about class action lawsuits. And this, I'm an attorney, as you guys have been listening know, and here's how the fees work, okay? So you take the total pot, which was $200 million, you said was the number?
200 and some change.
Okay, so then you divide, the concept is that you divide the settlement by the number of people in the class, but what we're forgetting here is the attorneys get their cut. The attorneys probably have a third.
Right. Isn't that
that's
roughly standard?
Roughly standard, plus the cost of litigation are separate from that. And so, the cost of litigation, which is the experts, which cost a fortune, and everything else, their administrative costs, that doesn't come out of their cut. That's separate and above and beyond it. And so that might be another 10% or 15%.
So let's say,
and so the
5% is going to the attorneys.
Right. Yeah. 45, 33% will go to the attorneys. The other 15% will go to pay the attorney's costs, which is a huge part of his experts. And so the attorneys, which is probably one law firm, and they probably have a bunch of, law firms around the country that are helping them sign up. And so those people are going to get a cut. So the attorney's going to walk away with that with about $65 million.
Yeah.
Say,
okay. So that $4,000 per person is really more like $2,500.
Right. Yeah. And the point is the clients are going to get a couple grand each, and the attorneys are going to get a lifetime of wealth out of it. Right. That's the class action system. That's why I hate the class action system. That's why, there's a big draw to drum up class. If you see late night, I'm a huge night owl. And so I'm always up watching late night. I'm always up watching like Frasier at 3 a.m. and if you do that, you'll see a bunch of class ads for class action lawsuits. If you had this pill back in 1978, call the Snyder and Thomas law firm in
everyone
Boston.
Probably remembers in the 90s it was nonstop asbestos things.
And who walked away with a ton of money from the asbestos lawsuit was the attorneys.
Yes, of course.
And that's why class actions are so popular. It's because it's an easy way to make a lot of money, and I hate that.
And I understand, like, it does seem like they're ripping off the people who actually, got screwed.
Well, something's fundamentally wrong with the attorneys making $65 million, and then the clients are going to make a couple grand,
right? But at the same time, I mean, it's part of that catch with litigation where the NCAA owes this money to these people. But
somebody has to prosecute the case,
right? I mean, somebody does have to prosecute the case, but it is kind of weird.
It's just always bugged me. And the class action guys I've talked to them about. I've had this conversation with class action attorneys, and they say, "Hey,
shut up! I have a Mercedes."
I mean, not in so many words. They just say, "Look, it's our case, and we deserve it." And that's the end of it.
Yeah. Well.
So anyway, at some point I understand that, but I didn't mean to turn this into
Steve getting all radical populist with the class action anti-attorney.
Well, you see, because the defense, I've also defended cases, and I mean, defense attorneys work by the hour,
right?
And so you're going to make your $500 an hour, which sounds like a lot, but it's nothing compared to what the class action attorneys are going to walk away from. The difference is that they're taking the risk. Okay, if they lose the case, those experts still need to be paid, and then that comes out of their pocket. And so the real answer that they will give you is that we are taking all the risk. You, Mr. Defense Attorney, are taking no risk because you're going to get paid no matter what. And I do understand that, and that they have a point. Something is fundamentally wrong with the class action guys, in this case, walking away with $65 million. Everybody else gets a couple grand. It just bugs me.
No, I get it, and I think that's a fair point. And my only experience with it is the book of Civil Action, which they made into that John Travolta movie 100 years ago. That's the only knowledge I have on it. But
that book was my summer reading headed into law school.
It was a good book.
That was like you had to. Yeah, I mean that I was supposed to have read that book by the time school started.
Okay.
Day one of law school. So, okay. But anyway, so that's the NCAA story. Stay tuned for more on that, and, stay tuned for more on the paying the player situation. because we will.
I think it loosely does tie into that whole topic.
Loosely, yeah. Okay, so we've got a few more minutes here, so let's hit. We've always got to hit the bad stuff because we can't shy away from that in this show, and so we have another episode of athletes behaving badly, and this week it's Tyreek Hill,
Still,
Chiefs.
Still,
Yeah,
Tyreek
still
Hill.
again Tyreek Hill. He is the Chiefs' very speedy wide receiver / do everything guy.
The Chiefs' whole offense for 3 years was based off of two terrible people. It sounds like.
Yeah, and both of whom are going to be gone.
Yeah,
which is ironic. So, if you go back in time when Tyreek Hill was drafted, you may remember that he had domestic violence situation happen while he was in college. I don't know if it's even allegedly at this point. I think it's not alleged. I think it's a fact to say that he punched his pregnant girlfriend in the stomach. Now, this happened before he was subject to the NFL rules, and so that he was never punished for it. But nonetheless, that was a black mark, and the Chiefs drafted him anyway because most teams don't care about that if you can play. So I mean, I think Hill's a bad guy. Okay,
I think that's fair
to me
say,
that
yes.
makes you a bad guy. So what has happened this week is that his child, and now I don't know if this is the same child on the same woman or not.
I think
Not
it is.
sure.
I think he's only got the one.
Okay, and so we think it's the same child. There was an allegation of child abuse a couple weeks ago because the child had a broken arm, and so the allegation was that happened in his home. We weren't sure if he did it or if someone else did it. That part was not clear.
Mm-hmm. It seems to be that it was probably him, right? I mean,
right, but we don't know that. But it
sure.
seems like right. So this late last week, for you guys listening to this at home, the child was removed from Hill's house by Child Protective Services pursuant to a court order, and so now he's lost his child. At a bare minimum, Hill, even if this kid was hurt by someone else, Hill's the father, and he should prevent this from happening. At a bare minimum. So I think you could safely assume that the NFL is already looking into this. There's probably evidence now that the NFL could probably suspend him, even without another thing happening.
If Child Protective Services came in, they're going to have a lot of documentation as to why they made this decision.
There's a court. Yeah, again, as far as I'm almost sure there's a court order on
even
this.
though I feel like they probably can do a lot, they have to, still lay out their reasoning for anything they do.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not an easy thing for Child Protective Services to take a child from the mother and father living in the same home. That's, yeah. Excuse me. And so anyway, if he's charged with a crime and he's found guilty of a crime to do with child abuse, that is prima facie evidence under the personal conduct policy. He can be suspended. And you can darn well believe that a guy who punched his pregnant girlfriend already, who has hurt this child again, if that's true, he is going to be subjected to the wrath of the NFL.
Yeah,
the wrath of the NFL
situation.
The
hopefully.
baseline is 6 games. If it were me, I mean, I think it ought to be a year.
I would at least go a year. I mean, to me, I hate to rank them. I consider hurting a kid worse than spousal abuse. Because a kid really,
at least it's an adult.
Yeah,
right. It's awful. Don't add Alex. He's not saying spousal abuse is good.
I'm just saying.
If you had to rank order them in, the level of hell that you go to is probably a lower level of hell, a worse level of hell for the child.
Right.
Yeah, I would
exactly. And so, to me, if I were the NFL, I would say 1 year minimum, maybe even that commissioner's indefinite suspension kind of list. Right off the bat. But I don't think I'm not with that with the rules.
Well, the policy doesn't really give a cap.
Right.
It just says the NFL. There's a baseline of 6, and it can be adjusted up or down as the facts see fit. Whether or not, so I mean, hypothetically, the policy does not prohibit them from saying you're just gone.
Right.
You're done. Goodbye. So what's going to happen? This is
I don't
maybe
think
a
the
topic.
NFL would do that, but that's kind of where
I don't. Maybe they should. I mean, maybe they should.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're not going to. That's not.
Sadly,
that's not good. It sounds
work.
great. Yeah, it sounds great, but they're not going to do that. Maybe. I think this is probably a topic for a future show, but what's going to happen probably is the Chiefs are probably going to have to cut him, and then somebody else is going to pick him up. And so the Chiefs are going to lose their player. Another team is going to, like the Redskins or the Browns, because the Browns picked up Kareem Hunt, are going to get a free player once he comes off suspension, be it a year or whatever. I think the NFL
For love
needs
of God,
to.
I hope somebody just locks Bruce Allen in a closet whenever that happens.
Well, see, this is where maybe this is going to be the topic of the next show. I think the NFL needs to prevent this from happening, okay? You should not be rewarded.
No.
If a team like the 49ers cuts Reuben Foster, or the Browns cut Kareem Hunt, or I'm not the Browns, the Chiefs cut Kareem Hunt, and they're going to have to cut Tyreek Hill probably. Another team should not be rewarded.
Right.
For a lack of morals. I think what ought to happen is that the NFL needs to change its rules so these type of players on these domestic violence situations cannot be signed during the period of their suspension.
They basically should have some kind of a personal conduct cut rule.
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense.
Right. Yeah,
As soon
a personal
as you cut
conduct
a player,
cut. That's
if
good.
the NFL says it's a personal conduct reason, and it should be up to the NFL, not the team, obviously.
Right. And I can understand, if a team doesn't want a guy like that employed on their company, I get that. And, and I don't think the NFL can say you have to keep him.
No.
So there needs to be some sort of, because, I would want Tyreek Hill gone.
Yeah,
too,
I would too.
Yeah.
As good as he is, you don't.
Yeah, it's just at some point you have to stand up for what's right.
Right.
So
I know that's
I
hard
like
for
that.
the NFL owners.
I like that idea. Like a personal conduct cut that says we're cutting you on
that's
the
a good
NFL's
thought.
personal conduct policy, and you cannot. If that happens, you can't be signed during the pendency of the investigation and the subsequent suspension. And after that, if somebody wants to take a chance on you, fine. I mean, that seems to be a more fair thing than just like the Redskins grabbing Reuben Foster and hoping, crossing their fingers.
Yeah.
So stay tuned on that.
But that's I'm glad they got the kid out of there. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
Lastly.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So we are running out of time here. At the we're at the bitter end here, and we do kind of have a hard stop coming up. So the very last thing we'd like to point out, because we know Alex is, just one of Alex's true loves of his life is weird little, sports leagues.
Football, yes.
Yeah. And so we'd like to point out, Alex.
Yes.
Go ahead. I'll let you say it. Go ahead.
Over 50 players now from the dead Alliance of American Football are now in the NFL on some kind of contract, which I'm glad for those guys. I mean, probably most of them won't make it through camp, but to me, it does point to the idea that a minor league would actually be beneficial to the NFL because that's a bunch of bodies who they can use.
Maybe they need to sign up with Vince McMahon have Vince McMahon be the minor league and let him scream and yell about. Can you imagine that? A bunch of conservative, stodgy NFL owners having to deal with Vince McMahon.
Well, I mean, he's a conservative guy too, but
but he's Mr. Wrestling,
right?
It's the opposite of what the NFL wants.
He's also a carny, yes.
Yeah, exactly. He's a carnival barker, basically.
Yeah.
So stay tuned to see. The Redskins, our beloved Redskins, have signed 3 or 4 of these guys.
3 now. We signed some quarterback from San Diego.
I'd never heard of that
pushed him over the
quarterback
mark.
before. Yeah, I'd never heard of that quarterback before.
He played
I
for
saw
Baltimore
that
a year ago.
For 5 minutes,
Yeah,
probably.
yeah, training camp.
So, anyway, stay tuned for that. And we have come to the end of another episode of It's Just Business. We have an email now, people. I don't think Chris mentioned the fact that we have an email on the last show. No. So, oh God, what is it? Is it IJB,
yes,
Alex?
All of our emails for our website are just the initials of the shows at thehogside.com.
Because we're creative. We are creative. We are creative people.
I try and keep things simple.
So if you want to email us, please email us. It's IJB@thehogside.com. You can find us on Twitter at It's Just Business Pod, which I don't quite know why Chris picked a name like that. But
maybe It's Just Business was already taken. I don't know.
Possibly, yeah. But regardless, we're on Twitter now, and we're on I man the Hogside Twitter most of the time, but not all the time. You can find me there. Alex, you have a personal Twitter.
Yeah, Alex at 35332 is my personal Twitter. People want to bug me and tell me that I'm wrong, that hurting kids is not worse than hurting women, or whatever they want to say.
And nothing. I love nothing more than people who don't know what they're talking about,
right,
tweeting in and saying, "Oh, you're wrong. You don't know what you're talking about." Because most of the time we actually do.
Do you ever check out our YouTube page in the comments every once in a while?
No,
it's a lot of
hint behind the curtain. No, I don't read any of the YouTube comments.
It's a lot of that.
Feel free to leave a comment because we like that, but
Yeah.
we don't actually read them.
I do.
So.
I read them all.
Oh, good. So somebody. Okay.
Yes.
So anyway, so this is the bitter end of the show, and we will see you again in another 2 weeks.